Harry Potter never planned to rule Hogwarts. At least, that was what everyone believed. To most students and teachers, he was still the same boy they knew, quiet, brave, sometimes reckless, and often lucky. But beneath that simple image, something had slowly begun to change. The war with Voldemort had taught Harry one important lesson: power did not always belong to the strongest wizard in the room. Real power belonged to the person who understood people, secrets, and timing. And Hogwarts was a castle full of secrets. It started during his 6th year, though nobody noticed it at first. Harry had begun paying attention to things others ignored. He listened when students whispered in the corridors. He noticed which professors trusted which students. He watched how rumors moved through the school faster than any owl could fly. At first, it was only curiosity, but slowly Harry realized something strange. Hogwarts was not really controlled by the teachers or even by the headmaster. The castle moved according to influence: who people trusted, who people feared, and who knew the right secrets. And Harry Potter knew more secrets than anyone else. The first person who noticed the change was Hermione. One evening in the Gryffindor common room, she closed her book and looked at Harry with a careful expression. "You've been thinking about something for days," she said quietly. "What is it?" Harry leaned back in his chair, staring at the fire. "Have you ever thought about how easy it is to move things in this school?" Hermione frowned. "Move things?" "People," Harry said calmly. "Rumors, decisions, even teachers sometimes." Ron, who had been half asleep beside them, blinked. "Mate, you sound like you're planning a prank on the entire school." Harry smiled slightly, but there was something different in his eyes. "No prank," he said, "something bigger." Hermione immediately understood that tone. It was the same tone Harry used when he had a dangerous idea. "Harry," she said carefully, "what exactly are you planning?" Harry lowered his voice. "Nothing evil. I just realized something. Hogwarts needs protection, real protection, not just teachers reacting after something bad happens." Ron sat up. "We already defeated Voldemort." "For now," Harry replied, "but darkness always returns, and when it does, Hogwarts will be the first place it touches." Hermione crossed her arms. "And you think you can protect it better than the professors?" Harry didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around the common room. Students were laughing, playing wizard chess, reading books. None of them had any idea how fragile their world really was. "I don't need to be stronger than the professors," Harry finally said. "I just need to know what's happening before they do." That was how it began. At first, Harry simply started helping people. A Ravenclaw student who lost a valuable potion ingredient suddenly found it returned anonymously. A group of Hufflepuffs dealing with a bullying problem discovered that the bully mysteriously received detention for 3 straight weeks. A Slytherin student spreading dangerous rumors suddenly found those rumors turning against him. No one could explain how these things happened. But slowly, students started noticing something strange. If you told Harry about a problem, somehow it would disappear. It was subtle. Harry never gave orders. He never asked people to spy. He only listened. And people talked. Luna Lovegood shared things she overheard from Ravenclaw Tower. Neville, who had become more confident, often mentioned things happening in the greenhouses. Ginny, sharp and observant, noticed what was happening among the younger students. Even students from other houses began quietly trusting Harry. Not because he demanded loyalty, because he had earned it. Within months, Harry knew more about what was happening inside Hogwarts than most professors. But the real turning point came one cold evening when Professor McGonagall called him into her office. The headmistress looked tired as she sat behind her desk. "Mr. Potter," she said, adjusting her glasses, "something unusual has been happening in this school." Harry tilted his head slightly. "Unusual, Professor?" "Yes," she said slowly. "Problems are being solved before the staff even hears about them. Conflicts between houses are disappearing. Students who are causing trouble are suddenly behaving." She leaned forward, studying him closely. "And strangely enough," she continued, Many of these changes seem to appear shortly after you speak with certain students." Harry stayed silent. McGonagall's sharp eyes watched him carefully. For a long moment, the room was completely quiet. Then she sighed. "Mr. Potter," she said, "are you secretly running this school?" Harry couldn't help smiling a little. "Not running it," he said calmly. "Just keeping an eye on things." McGonagall stared at him. And slowly, a very small smile appeared on her face. "Well," she said quietly, "if you are, try not to break too many rules." Harry stood and nodded politely. But as he left the office and walked through the long stone corridors of Hogwarts, one thing became very clear. The castle was changing. Students were beginning to trust someone other than the teachers. They didn't say it out loud, but deep down, many of them already knew the truth. Hogwarts had a protector who worked in silence, and his name was Harry Potter. The boy who lived was quietly becoming something far more powerful. Not a hero, not a ruler, but the shadow behind the throne of Hogwarts. After leaving Professor McGonagall's office, Harry walked slowly through the quiet corridors of Hogwarts. The torches along the walls flickered gently, casting long shadows across the stone floor. Most students had already gone back to their common rooms, and the castle felt calmer than usual. But Harry's mind was far from calm. McGonagall's question stayed in his thoughts. "Are you secretly running this school?" She had said it almost like a joke, yet there was truth behind it. Harry didn't want to rule Hogwarts. That had never been his goal, but he had learned something important over the years. If you didn't guide events, someone else would, and sometimes that someone else could be dangerous. The next morning, things continued like normal on the surface. Students rushed through the corridors trying not to be late for class. Owls flew through the Great Hall delivering letters and packages. Professors gave lectures about charms, potions, and magical theory. Everything looked peaceful. But Harry was watching carefully. At the Gryffindor table, he quietly listened as two younger students talked about a strange argument that had happened in the library the night before. At the Ravenclaw table, Luna noticed a group of older students whispering nervously about something they refused to explain. Even the Slytherin table seemed unusually tense. Harry noticed all of it. Later that afternoon, he met Ron and Hermione near the edge of the Quidditch field. The wind was cool, and the sky was turning grey with clouds. Ron kicked a small stone across the grass. "So, you're basically running Hogwarts now," he said with a grin. Harry shook his head. "That's not what I'm doing." Hermione raised an eyebrow. "Harry, half the students come to you when something goes wrong. Even some prefects ask for your advice." Ron laughed. "You're like some secret Hogwarts problem solver." Harry looked toward the tall towers of the castle. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but lately something feels off." Hermione immediately became serious. "What do you mean?" "I'm hearing strange things," Harry replied. "Students arguing in places they usually wouldn't, people whispering about meetings late at night, and no one wants to explain why." Ron frowned. "Probably just normal school drama." Harry slowly shook his head. "No," he said, "it feels organized." Hermione's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. She understood exactly what Harry meant. "If someone is organizing something inside Hogwarts," she said slowly, "that could be dangerous." Before Harry could answer, a familiar voice spoke from behind them. "Well, well, Potter holding secret meetings again." They turned and saw Draco Malfoy standing a few steps away. His usual confident smirk was on his face, but there was curiosity in his eyes. Ron groaned. "Oh great, what do you want, Malfoy?" Draco ignored him and looked directly at Harry. "You've been busy lately," Draco said calmly. "Students from every house talking to you, problems disappearing, rumors changing direction." Harry remained quiet. Draco crossed his arms. "You know what that looks like." Ron rolled his eyes. "Here we go." But Draco wasn't joking. "It looks like someone quietly controlling the school," Draco finished. For a moment, none of them spoke. Hermione watched Draco carefully. If you're trying to accuse Harry of something. I'm not accusing him, Draco interrupted. I'm impressed. That surprised everyone. Draco looked back toward the castle. My father used to say real power isn't loud, he continued. It moves quietly while everyone else argues. His eyes returned to Harry. And lately, Potter, things in this school seem to move exactly how you want. Harry studied Draco for a moment. Draco was many things, arrogant, proud, sometimes cruel, but he wasn't stupid. You're observant, Harry finally said. Draco smirked slightly. Of course I am. Ron crossed his arms. So what? Planning to report Harry to the professors. Draco laughed softly. And ruin the most interesting thing happening at Hogwarts, he said. Hardly. Then his expression became serious. But if you are quietly controlling things, Potter, you should know something. Harry's eyes narrowed. What? Draco leaned closer, lowering his voice. You're not the only one building something inside this castle. A cold wind passed across the field. Hermione spoke first. What are you talking about? Draco glanced around to make sure no one else was listening. For the past 2 weeks, he said, some Slytherin students have been disappearing at night, not permanently, just for a few hours. Ron frowned, probably sneaking out of the dorms. That's what I thought too, Draco said, until I followed them. Harry immediately focused on him, and Draco's smirk faded. They're meeting someone. Hermione's voice became tense. Who? Draco shook his head slowly. I couldn't see clearly, he said. They met in one of the unused corridors near the old dungeons. Ron shrugged. So, maybe just some secret club. Draco looked directly at Harry again. Clubs don't usually involve students whispering about the return of old loyalties. The air suddenly felt heavier. Harry's mind raced. Those words sounded familiar and dangerous. Old loyalties, Hermione repeated quietly. Draco nodded. That's what I heard, he said, and when one of them noticed me watching, they said something even stranger. Harry stepped closer. What did they say? Draco's voice dropped to almost a whisper. They said Hogwarts will soon belong to the right kind of wizards again. Ron's face darkened immediately. That sounds exactly like the old pureblood nonsense. Hermione looked worried. Harry remained silent, but his thoughts were moving quickly. If someone inside Hogwarts was trying to rebuild dangerous beliefs, it meant the castle was facing a threat no professor had noticed yet. And that meant one thing. Harry's quiet watch over Hogwarts was about to become something much bigger. Because if a secret group was rising inside the castle, then the shadow protector of Hogwarts would have to step forward and stop them before darkness spread again. And this time, Harry wouldn't fight alone. Because whether they realized it or not, students from every house had already become part of Harry Potter's hidden network. Harry didn't speak for several seconds after Draco finished talking. The wind continued to move across the Quidditch field, bending the tall grass slightly. Ron looked angry, Hermione looked worried, and Draco looked strangely calm, like someone who had already accepted that something dangerous was happening. Harry finally took a slow breath. Show me, he said. Ron blinked. Show you what? The place where you followed them, Harry replied, looking at Draco. Draco studied Harry carefully, as if trying to decide whether he trusted him enough. After a moment, he nodded. Tonight, Draco said quietly, they usually move after midnight. Hermione crossed her arms. We should be careful. If this is what it sounds like, those students might not be acting alone. Harry agreed. Something about the situation felt too organized to be random. Secret meetings, whispers about old loyalties, students gathering in hidden parts of the castle. It reminded him of stories about how dark groups had once begun forming during Voldemort's rise. Except this time, Harry intended to stop it before it could grow. That evening, the Great Hall was filled with its usual noise and activity. Students talked loudly about homework, Quidditch practice, and weekend plans. Plates filled with food passed across the long tables, while enchanted candles floated above them. To anyone watching, Harry looked completely normal. He laughed at Ron's jokes, discussed homework with Hermione, and listened as Ginny talked about the upcoming Quidditch match. But inside, Harry was watching everything. A few tables away, he noticed two Slytherin students whispering to each other before leaving the hall earlier than usual. Across the room, Luna was quietly observing the same thing from the Ravenclaw table. When their eyes met, she gave Harry a small knowing nod. She had noticed too. Harry finished his dinner and stood up. "I'm going to take a walk," he said casually. Hermione immediately understood. Ron stood as well. A few minutes later, the three of them slipped out of the Great Hall and into the quieter corridors of the castle. They met Draco near a stairway that led down toward the lower levels. "You're late," Draco said softly. Ron rolled his eyes. "Relax, Malfoy." Draco ignored him and motioned for them to follow. The deeper they went into the castle, the darker and colder the corridors became. These were parts of Hogwarts most students rarely visited. Old stone walls were covered with faded tapestries, and the torches along the walls burned dimly. Draco eventually stopped near a narrow hallway that curved toward the old dungeon section. "They meet somewhere past that corner," he whispered. Harry listened carefully. At first, there was nothing but silence. Then he heard it. Voices. Very quiet, but definitely there. Harry stepped closer to the wall and slowly peeked around the corner. Down the corridor, a group of 6 students stood in a small circle. The torchlight made it hard to see their faces clearly, but Harry recognized the green Slytherin badges on their robes. One of them was speaking in a low voice. "Hogwarts has grown weak," the student said. "For years, the wrong people have controlled it." Another student nodded. "Our families built the wizarding world. Pure wizarding blood built it." Ron clenched his fists quietly behind Harry. The first student continued speaking. "But things are changing again. Our parents say the old ways are slowly returning. Wizards are remembering who truly belongs in power." Hermione's expression hardened. Then a 7th figure stepped forward from the shadows. This one was not a student. Harry immediately noticed the difference. The figure was taller, wearing a dark cloak that partially hid their face. The students became silent as the cloaked figure spoke. "You must be patient," the figure said in a calm but cold voice. "Real power grows slowly." Harry felt a strange chill. Something about the voice felt familiar, but he couldn't place it. "The wizarding world is still weak after the last war," the cloaked figure continued, "but soon it will be ready to rise again." One of the students asked nervously, "What about Harry Potter?" For a moment, the corridor became completely silent. Then the cloaked figure gave a quiet laugh. "Harry Potter is a symbol," the figure said, "but symbols can fall." Harry's eyes narrowed. The figure continued. "If Hogwarts returns to the control of proper wizarding families, Potter will become irrelevant." Ron whispered angrily, "I'd like to see them try." But Harry raised his hand, signaling for silence. The cloaked figure spoke again. "For now, continue watching the school, gather information, influence younger students. When the time is right, Hogwarts will belong to us again." The students nodded. Then suddenly, the cloaked figure paused. Harry felt his heart skip slightly. Slowly, the figure turned its head toward the dark corner, where Harry and the others were hiding. For a brief moment, Harry thought their eyes met through the darkness. Then the figure smiled faintly. Interesting, the voice said softly. Before anyone could react, the torches along the hallway suddenly flickered violently. Shadows jumped across the walls, and the cloaked figure disappeared into the darkness at the far end of the corridor. The students quickly scattered in different directions. Within seconds, the hallway was empty. Ron stepped forward angrily. We should have grabbed one of them. Hermione shook her head. That figure wasn't just a random supporter, that was someone experienced. Draco looked unsettled. I've never seen that person before, he admitted. Harry remained silent. Because one thing was now clear. Someone from outside Hogwarts had already begun influencing students inside the castle. And worse, that person already suspected Harry was watching. Harry slowly turned toward the others. This just became a real war, he said quietly. Ron frowned. A war inside Hogwarts. Harry nodded. Yes, he said. Then his eyes became determined. And if they think they can secretly take over this school? A faint, dangerous confidence appeared in his voice. They clearly haven't realized yet. Hogwarts already has someone ruling it from the shadows. Harry and the others stayed in the dark corridor for a few moments after the mysterious figure disappeared. The castle felt unusually quiet again, almost like nothing had happened, but all of them knew they had just seen the beginning of something serious. Ron was the first to speak. All right, he said, lowering his voice, but still sounding angry. That was definitely not normal school trouble. Hermione nodded slowly. Someone from outside Hogwarts is influencing students. That's extremely dangerous. Draco leaned against the stone wall, thinking, and whoever that cloaked person is, they're confident enough to walk inside Hogwarts at night. Harry's mind was already racing ahead. The figure had spoken like someone experienced, someone who understood how to slowly build influence. They weren't rushing anything. They were planting ideas inside the minds of students. And that meant the threat could spread quietly. Harry looked down the hallway where the figure had vanished. They already have a group, he said. Maybe small for now, but it will grow if no one stops them. Ron cracked his knuckles, so we stop them. Hermione frowned slightly. It's not that simple, Ron. If we run to the professors with this, they'll question the students involved, and whoever that cloaked leader is will disappear. Draco nodded reluctantly. She's right. Whoever that person is, they're careful. Harry turned toward the stairs, leading back up into the castle. Then we do the same thing they're doing, he said. Ron looked confused. What do you mean? Harry's voice became calm and focused. We build something stronger. The next day, Hogwarts felt exactly the same as always. Classes continued. Students complained about homework. Owls flew through the open windows of the Great Hall. But beneath the normal routine, something new had begun moving. Harry started quietly speaking to certain students again, but this time with a clearer purpose. At breakfast, he sat beside Neville and asked casually about anything strange happening in the greenhouses. Neville mentioned 2 students who had recently started asking unusual questions about magical plants used in defensive potions. Later, Luna shared something she overheard in the Ravenclaw common room. A few students had been discussing the idea that Hogwarts had lost its old traditions. Ginny reported something similar among the younger Gryffindor students. Little pieces of information began connecting together. By evening, Harry had a better picture of what was happening. The mysterious group wasn't large yet, but their ideas were spreading through quiet conversations. And someone was guiding those conversations. That night, Harry called a small meeting in an unused classroom on the 3rd floor. The room was dimly lit by a few floating candles. Around the room sat Hermione, Ron, Ginny, Neville, Luna, and surprisingly, Draco. Ron still looked slightly annoyed about that. Draco sat with his arms crossed. "Don't look at me like that, Weasley. I'm not joining your little friendship club. I just hate the idea of someone else manipulating Slytherin's students." Harry stood near the front of the room. "What we saw last night wasn't random," he began. "Someone is trying to rebuild the same kind of thinking that caused the last war." Hermione added quietly, "And they're starting with students who are easy to influence." Neville looked worried. "What if more students join them?" Harry nodded. "That's exactly why we can't ignore it." Ginny leaned forward. "So what's the plan?" Harry paused for a moment before answering. "We protect Hogwarts." Ron grinned slightly. "Sounds familiar." Harry continued. "But this time we do it quietly. No big announcements. No secret army like before." Draco smirked faintly. "A shadow war." Harry met his eyes. "Yes." Hermione quickly understood where Harry was going. "We watch the castle," she said, "every house." Luna smiled softly. "Ravenclaws notice things others miss." Neville nodded nervously but determined. "And I know a lot of the younger Hufflepuff students." Ginny crossed her arms confidently. "Gryffindor with you." Everyone looked toward Draco. He sighed dramatically. "If Slytherin students are being pulled into something dangerous," Draco said, "I'd prefer to know about it before they destroy the school." Harry felt a small sense of relief. With all four houses quietly watching, they could track the spread of the secret group. But there was still one problem. The mysterious, cloaked leader. Ron asked the question everyone was thinking. Who was that person last night? Harry shook his head slowly. "I don't know yet." Hermione looked thoughtful. "But they knew about you," she said. "They mentioned your name." Harry remembered the strange smile the figure gave before disappearing. "Yes," he said quietly. "And I think they were testing something." Draco raised an eyebrow. "Testing what?" Harry's voice became serious. "To see if someone inside Hogwarts is already standing in their way." The room grew silent, because deep down, they all understood what that meant. The unknown leader had started building a hidden movement inside the school. But now Harry and his friends had begun building something too. Two secret forces were forming inside the walls of Hogwarts, and neither side fully knew how powerful the other might become. As the meeting ended and everyone quietly left the classroom, Harry stayed behind for a moment, looking out the tall window toward the dark castle grounds. Somewhere out there, the cloaked figure was planning their next move. But Harry was planning his as well. Because Hogwarts had become more than just a school to him. It was home. And if someone thought they could secretly take control of it, they were about to discover something important. Harry Potter had already mastered the art of fighting in the shadows. Over the next several days, Hogwarts continued its normal rhythm on the surface. Students hurried to classes, complained about essays, and talked excitedly about the next Quidditch match. To most people, the castle felt peaceful and safe. But quietly, two different forces were beginning to grow inside its ancient walls. Harry's network moved carefully. He never called it an army, and he never gave anyone official titles. Instead, he simply asked people to pay attention. If they noticed strange conversations, unusual meetings, or students spreading dangerous ideas, they quietly passed the information along. It was simple, but it worked. Neville kept watch around the greenhouses and the paths near Hufflepuff's common room. Luna listened in the Ravenclaw Tower, where students often discussed strange theories and rumors late into the night. Ginny observed the younger Gryffindor students, making sure no one was being influenced by the wrong kind of thinking. And Draco watched the Slytherins. At first, Draco had only joined out of curiosity, but soon he started taking the situation seriously. Several Slytherin students had begun acting differently. They spoke in quieter groups, often leaving the common room late at night. Draco reported everything to Harry. 3 nights after the secret meeting in the dungeon corridor, Harry stood near one of the tall windows overlooking the courtyard. The moonlight spread across the stone ground below. He had been thinking about the mysterious cloaked figure constantly. Someone like that wouldn't simply disappear after being discovered. They would be planning their next move. Footsteps approached behind him. "You're thinking too loudly again." Harry turned and saw Luna walking toward him, her usual calm smile on her face. "Thinking too loudly?" Harry asked. "Yes," Luna said gently. "Your face does that thing when you're solving a problem." Harry chuckled slightly. "Maybe you're right." Luna leaned against the wall beside him and looked out the window. "I heard something interesting today," she said casually. Harry immediately paid attention. Luna rarely said something was interesting unless it truly was. "What did you hear?" A few Ravenclaw students were talking about a new idea spreading through some of the houses, Luna explained. "They said Hogwarts has become too open, too welcoming." Harry frowned slightly. "That sounds familiar." "Yes," Luna said calmly. "They also said someone is teaching them that the wizarding world used to be stronger when only certain families held power." Harry's jaw tightened. The same dangerous thinking again. "Did they mention who's spreading these ideas?" he asked. Luna shook her head slowly. "No, but they said the person speaks very confidently, like someone important." Harry sighed quietly. That mysterious figure again. Just then, more footsteps echoed through the hallway. Hermione and Ron approached quickly. "We found something," Hermione said immediately. Harry turned to them. "What happened?" Ron looked excited and slightly worried at the same time. "Malfoy followed one of those students again tonight," he said. Hermione nodded, and this time he didn't lose them. Harry's attention sharpened. "Where did they go?" Hermione lowered her voice. "Not the dungeons this time." "Then where?" Harry asked. Ron grinned slightly. "The Room of Requirement." Harry's eyes widened. The Room of Requirement was one of the most unpredictable places inside Hogwarts. It appeared only when someone truly needed it, and it could become almost anything depending on the user's request. That made it the perfect place for secret meetings. "Draco watching the corridor right now," Hermione continued. "He sent a message through one of the younger students." Harry immediately started walking. "Let's go." The 4 of them moved quickly through the castle corridors, keeping their voices low and their footsteps quiet. As they approached the hidden hallway where the Room of Requirement appeared, Harry could already feel the tension in the air. Draco stood near the wall, pretending to read a book, but when he saw them, he quickly closed it. "They're inside," he whispered. Ron glanced at the blank stretch of wall. "How many?" "5 students," Draco said, "and someone else." Harry felt that same cold feeling from before. "The cloaked figure." Draco nodded slowly. Harry stared at the wall where the hidden room waited. Inside that room, someone was secretly shaping the future of Hogwarts. Someone who believed the school should belong only to certain wizards. Ron whispered, "So what's the plan?" Harry thought carefully. Charging in blindly could cause panic and make the leader disappear again. Instead, he took a slow breath. "We listen first," he said. They quietly moved closer to the door that had appeared in the wall. Faint voices could be heard from inside. "The school is changing again," the cloaked figure was saying, "and when the time comes, those who stood with us will hold real power." One of the students asked nervously, "What about the professors?" A soft laugh answered, "Professors can be replaced." Harry's expression darkened. The figure continued speaking. "Hogwarts will soon return to its rightful path." Harry slowly reached for the door handle. Ron whispered urgently, "Harry." Harry looked at his friends. "We can't let this grow any further," he said quietly. Then he opened the door. The room inside looked like a small meeting hall lit by floating candles. The students inside turned in shock as the door suddenly swung open. And standing in the center of the room, the mysterious, cloaked figure slowly turned toward Harry. This time, the hood slipped slightly, just enough for Harry to see part of the person's face. Harry froze because he recognized them, and the realization made his stomach drop. Someone connected to Hogwarts itself was behind everything. For a moment, no one inside the room moved. The floating candles flickered softly above them, casting long shadows across the stone floor. The 5 students standing around the center looked shocked, their faces pale as they stared at the door. None of them had expected anyone to walk in. But Harry wasn't looking at them. His eyes were locked on the cloaked figure. The hood had slipped just enough for him to see part of the face. Only a glimpse, a sharp jawline, familiar gray eyes, and a calm expression that didn't show even the smallest amount of panic. The figure slowly reached up and pulled the hood back completely. Ron inhaled sharply. "No way!" Hermione's eyes widened in disbelief. Standing in front of them was Professor Cassian Rowell, one of the newer teachers at Hogwarts. He had arrived only a year earlier, teaching advanced magical theory. Most students knew him as a quiet professor who rarely raised his voice and always spoke politely. But now the calm smile on his face felt very different. "Well," Rowell said smoothly, "this is unexpected." The 5 students standing near him looked confused and nervous. One of them stammered, "Professor, they weren't supposed to." Rowell raised a hand gently, stopping the student from speaking. "It's all right," he said calmly. "Secrets rarely stay hidden forever." Harry stepped forward slightly. "Professor Rowell," he said slowly. Rowell studied him with interest. "Mr. Potter," he replied, "I suppose I should have guessed you would eventually find me." Ron looked furious. "You're the one spreading all this pure-blood nonsense around the school." Rowell chuckled quietly. "Nonsense," he repeated, "such an emotional word." Hermione stepped forward beside Harry. "You've been manipulating students," she said firmly, "encouraging them to believe certain wizards are better than others." Rowell tilted his head slightly, like a teacher listening to an incorrect answer. "I prefer the word educating." Draco suddenly spoke from behind Harry. "You're poisoning their thinking." Rowell's eyes shifted toward him. "Ah, Mr. Malfoy," he said thoughtfully, "your family once understood these ideas quite well." Draco's expression hardened. "My family also learned what happens when people take those ideas too far." Rowell smiled faintly. "Did they?" he asked. The students standing around the room were now clearly uncomfortable. They had expected a secret meeting, not a confrontation. Harry looked around the room quickly, taking everything in. The students were nervous, but not dangerous. They had been influenced, guided slowly toward believing something without fully understanding it. The real problem was standing in front of them. "Why are you doing this?" Harry asked. Rowell clasped his hands calmly behind his back. "Because the wizarding world has become weak," he said simply. Ron scoffed, "Here we go again." Rowell ignored him and continued. "For centuries, Hogwarts trained the most powerful wizarding families. Discipline, tradition, strength." He gestured slightly toward the castle walls. But over time, those traditions were replaced by ideas about equality and openness. Hermione frowned. "You mean fairness?" Rowell shook his head. "No, I mean weakness." The room fell silent. Rowell continued, speaking in the calm tone of someone giving a lecture. "When everyone is treated the same, standards fall, power fades, leadership disappears. Harry's voice became colder. So you decided to rebuild the old system. Raoul looked pleased. Exactly. Ron stepped forward angrily. You're trying to start the same kind of thinking that caused the last war. Raoul sighed lightly. That war failed because it was rushed, he said, because its leader ruled through fear instead of intelligence. Harry's eyes narrowed. You're talking about Voldemort. Raoul nodded calmly. A powerful wizard, but impatient. Hermione looked shocked. You're seriously saying you could do better? Raoul smiled slightly. I already am. He gestured around the room. These students came to me willingly, not because they were forced, but because they believe the wizarding world deserves stronger leadership again. Harry looked at the nervous students. They didn't look evil. They looked confused. And that made this situation even more dangerous. Because ideas could spread faster than curses. Harry stepped closer to Raoul. You're not rebuilding strength, he said quietly. You're rebuilding division. Raoul met his gaze calmly. Division creates order. For a moment, the two simply stared at each other. Then Raoul spoke again. You know something interesting, Mr. Potter? Harry didn't answer. I've been hearing rumors about you, Raoul continued. Students across all houses trusting you, problems disappearing, conflicts being quietly solved. A faint smile returned to Raoul's face. A shadow protector of Hogwarts. Ron muttered, who's been talking? Raoul ignored him. I must admit, he said to Harry, I'm impressed. You built influence in this castle without titles, authority, or fear. Harry remained silent. Raoul stepped a little closer. Which is exactly why you're dangerous to my plans. Hermione tensed slightly. Raoul continued calmly. You and I understand the same truth, Mr. Potter. And what truth is that? Harry asked. Raoul's voice became quieter. That the person who truly controls Hogwarts isn't the headmaster. He leaned slightly forward. It's the one who controls the students. The floating candles flickered again as the tension in the room grew heavier. Two quiet leaders now stood facing each other, both working from the shadows, both influencing the future of Hogwarts, and both fully aware that only one of them could win this silent war. For several long seconds, no one in the room spoke. The air felt heavy, almost like the castle itself was holding its breath. The students who had gathered around Professor Raoul looked back and forth between him and Harry, unsure what they should do. Raoul stood calmly, his posture relaxed, as if this confrontation had been expected all along. Harry, however, was thinking quickly. Charging forward or starting a fight would only make things worse. These students were already confused, and if things turned chaotic, Raoul might escape again and continue spreading his ideas somewhere else in the castle. Harry needed to do something else. Something smarter. He slowly looked around the room at the students. Do you all understand what's happening here? Harry asked quietly. None of them answered. One of the Slytherin boys looked down at the floor. Another shifted nervously. Raoul smiled faintly. You see, Mr. Potter, they are simply learning. Harry shook his head. No, he said calmly, they're being used. Raoul's smile faded slightly. Harry stepped further into the room, his voice steady but firm. You told them Hogwarts has become weak, he continued, but you didn't tell them the full story. The students slowly began paying attention to him. Raoul folded his arms. Go on then, enlighten them. Harry nodded slightly. You talk about strength like it belongs only to certain families, Harry said, but I've seen real strength in people who had nothing, people who weren't born into powerful names. He glanced toward Neville. Neville Longbottom stood up to the darkest wizard in history, when most people were afraid to move. Neville looked surprised but proud. Harry then looked toward Hermione. Hermione Granger became one of the smartest witches at Hogwarts without any magical family behind her. Hermione gave him a small smile. Harry turned back toward the students. And the war that Professor Roll mentioned, it wasn't won by powerful bloodlines. His voice grew stronger. It was won by people standing together. Roll sighed quietly. Emotional speeches, he said, very inspiring. But Harry noticed something. Two of the students were now looking uncertain. Harry continued calmly. Professor Roll says he's teaching you leadership, Harry said, but real leaders don't hide in secret meetings convincing students that others are inferior. The room grew quieter. Roll's eyes narrowed slightly. You're trying to turn them against me, he said. Harry shook his head. No, he replied, I'm giving them the choice you never offered. Roll was silent for a moment. Then he slowly began clapping. A slow, sarcastic applause. Impressive, he said, you really do have influence here. Ron muttered, you're just noticing that now. Roll ignored him and looked at the students. You see, he said calmly, this is exactly why I warned you about him. Harry Potter is very skilled at controlling how people think. Hermione frowned. That's not what he's doing. Roll tilted his head. Isn't it? He stepped slightly forward, his voice becoming more serious. Mr. Potter may pretend to stand for fairness, but he's been doing the exact same thing I have. Harry felt Ron and Hermione glance at him. Roll continued speaking. Quiet conversations, influencing students, building loyalty across the houses. A small smile returned to his face. Your shadow network, Mr. Potter. Ron blinked. How does he know about that? Harry stayed calm, though the realization was troubling. Roll had been watching him just as carefully. You see, students, Roll said smoothly, both of us understand the same truth. He gestured between himself and Harry. Hogwarts is not controlled by teachers. He paused. It's controlled by whoever the students choose to follow. The room fell silent again. Roll's voice became softer. And eventually, they must decide who deserves that loyalty. Harry met Roll's eyes. So that's your plan, he said quietly. Roll nodded. I'm not here to force anything. He looked around at the students. They will choose. Then he looked back at Harry. And so will the rest of the school. The tension in the room grew stronger. Roll turned toward the students one last time. For tonight, go back to your dormitories, he said calmly. The students hesitated, unsure. Then one by one, they slowly walked past Harry and his friends, leaving the room in silence. Within a minute, only two people remained standing in the center. Harry Potter and Professor Cassian Roll. Roll adjusted his cloak slightly. This castle is entering a very interesting time, he said. Harry didn't reply. Roll gave him one last thoughtful look. Let's see who the students truly trust. Then he walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused beside Harry and spoke quietly enough that only Harry could hear. You've built a very impressive shadow kingdom here, Mr. Potter. Harry said nothing. Roll's faint smile returned. But every kingdom eventually faces a challenge. With that, he stepped out of the room and disappeared into the corridor. Ron immediately spoke. Tell me we're reporting him to McGonagall right now. Hermione looked uncertain, but Harry was still staring at the doorway, thinking, because Roll had just turned the situation into something bigger. This wasn't just about a secret group anymore. Now it was a battle for for the loyalty of the entire school. And if Roll continued spreading his ideas, Hogwarts itself could slowly divide. Harry finally spoke quietly. "We're not finished with him." Ron crossed his arms. "Good, because I'm definitely not finished either." Harry looked toward the dark corridor where Roll had vanished. The Shadow War inside Hogwarts had officially begun. And now every student in the castle would slowly become part of it, whether they realized it or not. The days that followed felt strange inside Hogwarts. On the surface, everything still looked the same. Classes continued, students studied for exams, and the castle halls remained filled with the usual noise and laughter. But underneath that normal routine, a quiet tension had begun spreading. Harry could feel it everywhere. Conversations stopped when certain people walked into a room. Students whispered more often. Groups that once mixed freely now sometimes sat separately in the Great Hall. Nothing had exploded into open conflict yet, but the castle felt like a place slowly dividing into sides. Roll had been clever. Instead of forcing students to follow him, he had planted ideas. Ideas about strength, about tradition, about who deserved power in the wizarding world. Some students rejected those ideas immediately, but others found them interesting. And ideas, Harry knew, could be more dangerous than spells. One afternoon, Harry sat with Hermione and Ron in the library. Hermione had several books spread across the table, though she hadn't turned a page in nearly 10 minutes. "This is exactly how movements start," she said quietly. "Small groups, secret discussions, slow influence." Ron leaned back in his chair. "Yeah, but he's still just one professor." Hermione shook her head. "No, the problem is Roll alone. It's the students who start believing him." Harry nodded slightly. Hermione was right. If enough students accepted Roll's thinking, Hogwarts itself could change. Just then, Neville hurried toward their table. "You need to see this," he said nervously. Harry stood immediately. "What happened?" Neville glanced around before lowering his voice. "There's an argument happening in the courtyard." Ron frowned. "Arguments happen all the time." "Not like this," Neville said. The four of them quickly left the library and headed outside. As they reached the courtyard, they saw a large group of students gathered near the stone fountain. The crowd was split into two groups facing each other. Harry instantly recognized some of the students who had attended Roll's secret meetings. One of them, a tall Slytherin boy named Marcus Flintwood, was speaking loudly. "Hogwarts used to stand for something," Flintwood was saying. "Powerful wizarding families built this school." Across from him stood several students from different houses, including Ginny. "And now it stands for fairness," Ginny replied sharply. Flintwood scoffed. "Fairness," he said, "or lowering standards so anyone can pretend they belong." The crowd murmured uncomfortably. Harry stepped forward. "That's enough." Both groups turned toward him. Flintwood's expression hardened slightly. "Well, if it isn't the famous Harry Potter," he said, "the castle's unofficial leader." Ron muttered under his breath, "He's starting to sound like Roll." Harry ignored the comment and looked calmly at Flintwood. "Starting fights in the courtyard isn't proving anything," Harry said. Flintwood crossed his arms. "No fight here," he replied, "just a discussion." Ginny rolled her eyes. "You call insulting half the school a discussion?" Flintwood smirked. "Some truths are uncomfortable." Harry noticed several students watching carefully. Many of them looked unsure which side they agreed with. That worried him more than Flintwood's words. Harry stepped closer. "You think strength comes from excluding people," Harry said calmly, "but Hogwarts has always been strongest when its students stand together." Flintwood shook his head. "That's the kind of thinking that made the wizarding world soft." Before Harry could respond, a calm voice spoke from behind the crowd. "Interesting debate." Everyone turned. Professor Roll was walking slowly across the courtyard. His expression looked perfectly neutral, like a teacher observing a classroom discussion. Flintwood straightened immediately. "Professor," he said respectfully. Roll raised a hand slightly. "I wasn't aware students were holding political discussions between classes." Ginny crossed her arms. "Maybe if certain professors didn't start them, we wouldn't need to." Roll's eyes briefly met hers. Then he smiled politely. "Passion among students is not always a bad thing," he said. Harry stepped forward. "You're encouraging this?" Roll looked mildly surprised. "Encouraging students to think?" he asked. "No," Harry replied, "encouraging them to divide." The courtyard fell quiet again. Roll studied Harry carefully. "You see division," he said calmly. "I see debate." He gestured around the crowd. "These students are learning to question the future of their world." Ron whispered angrily, "He's twisting everything." Roll turned slightly, addressing the crowd. "However," he continued, "public arguments are rarely productive." Then he looked directly at Harry again. "Perhaps a more structured discussion would be better." Harry narrowed his eyes. "What kind of discussion?" Roll's smile grew slightly. "A debate." The students around them murmured with curiosity. Roll continued speaking. "1 week from today, in the Great Hall." Hermione frowned. "A school-wide debate." Roll nodded. "2 sides presenting their vision for the future of the wizarding world." His eyes remained on Harry. "You, Mr. Potter, represent the ideals Hogwarts currently teaches." Then he gestured slightly toward Flintwood and the other students. "And they will represent a different philosophy." Ron whispered, "He's turning this into a competition." Harry understood immediately. Roll wasn't just spreading ideas anymore. He was trying to win the loyalty of the entire school. Harry looked around at the watching students. If he refused, Roll's supporters would claim he was afraid. If he accepted, the entire castle would hear both sides. Roll waited patiently. "Well," he asked. Harry took a slow breath. Then he nodded. "Fine." A quiet excitement spread through the crowd. Roll's smile returned. "Excellent." He turned and began walking away. But before leaving, he said one last thing. "Next week, Mr. Potter, we will see whose vision Hogwarts truly believes in." As the crowd slowly began breaking apart, Ron looked at Harry. "Please tell me you already have a plan." Harry watched Roll disappear into the castle entrance. His mind was already moving quickly. Because this debate wasn't really about words. It was about influence. And whoever won the trust of the students would truly control the future of Hogwarts. The next few days passed in a tense haze. Hogwarts seemed normal, but every hallway, classroom, and common room felt charged with quiet anticipation. Whispers moved faster than ever before. Students were watching each other closely, and Harry could sense that loyalty was starting to shift. Every glance, every conversation mattered now. Every choice could be a tiny victory or a step toward Roll's influence. Harry spent hours preparing with Hermione, Ron, Ginny, Neville, Luna, and even Draco. They couldn't just rely on courage or magic. They needed strategy. They talked quietly in unused classrooms, mapped out which students could be persuaded, and rehearsed arguments that would appeal to everyone. They also gathered subtle evidence of Roll's manipulations, not to shame the students, but to show them the truth if the debate turned into a battle of ideas. Draco was surprisingly helpful. "These Slytherins are stubborn," he said one night as they worked late in the library. "They respect tradition, but they respect logic more. Hit them with that, and you win half the house." Harry nodded. "Logic and truth, that's what will beat fear and pride." By the day of the debate, the Great Hall had been transformed. Tables were pushed aside, Enchanted lights floated above, and students filled every corner. A sense of expectancy filled the air, like the castle itself was waiting for something significant to happen. Roll stood at one side of the hall, calm and composed, while Harry positioned himself on the other. Between them were students whispering nervously, many of whom were undecided. The debate began with Roll speaking first. He spoke about tradition, discipline, and the importance of strong wizarding families. His voice was smooth and persuasive, weaving history and rhetoric together so convincingly that several students nodded in agreement. He avoided overt threats, but every word carried weight. It was clear why he had been able to gather followers so quietly. Then Harry stepped forward. His voice wasn't loud or commanding, it didn't need to be. He spoke of courage, of unity, of the strength that comes from trusting each other rather than elevating only certain families. He told stories of ordinary students achieving extraordinary things, of past victories that hadn't depended on bloodlines, but on bravery, loyalty, and smart choices. He spoke slowly, deliberately, letting each point sink in. Some students hesitated, others looked inspired. Roll's supporters shifted slightly, uncertain. Harry noticed it immediately. Influence was fragile, especially when confidence in a leader wavered. Roll responded again, emphasizing efficiency, order, and selective loyalty. His arguments were clever, but Harry could sense cracks in the room. Some students were whispering to each other, questioning whether the version of Hogwarts Roll described was really what they wanted. By the time Harry finished his final argument, the hall was silent for a moment. Then a ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Students were no longer passive observers, they were thinking, debating quietly among themselves. Harry realized the debate had already begun to shift the balance. Influence didn't need to be shouted, it needed to be felt. Roll's eyes met Harry's across the hall. A small, sharp smile appeared on his lips. "Very clever," he said softly. Harry didn't respond. He only watched the students. Some nodded toward him, others toward Roll. The real challenge wasn't winning the debate, it was winning the hearts and minds of every student, slowly, quietly, and without anyone realizing how much control was really at stake. And Harry understood something important at that moment. The shadow war he had started was no longer secret. It was now a battle for Hogwarts itself. If he failed, the school would slowly fall under Roll's influence. If he succeeded, he could protect Hogwarts without anyone even knowing he had done it. Either way, the game had begun, and every choice from this point on could decide the future of the castle. Harry took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Because he was no longer just a student. He was the invisible force shaping the fate of Hogwarts. And he wouldn't let Roll or anyone steal that future. After the debate, the hall slowly emptied, but the tension didn't fade. Students lingered in small groups, whispering about what they had heard. Some were curious, some nervous, and some clearly influenced by Roll's polished words. Harry walked through the crowd quietly, letting his eyes meet as many students as he could. Some nodded at him, a subtle sign of support. Others avoided his gaze entirely. Each reaction told him more than any conversation could. Back in the Gryffindor common room, Harry gathered with Hermione, Ron, Ginny, Neville, Luna, and Draco. The fire flickered across their faces as they sat in a tight circle. "We did well," Harry said softly, "but we're not finished. Roll planted seeds tonight. Some students will believe him no matter what we do." Hermione frowned. "We have to follow up carefully, show the truth without forcing it." Draco leaned back, arms crossed, "And stop him from building more followers. If he's smart, he'll keep recruiting in secret." Neville's hands were slightly trembling. "I saw a few younger students talking about him in the corridors. They seemed fascinated." Ginny's jaw tightened. "We can't let that spread. Hogwarts can't split like this." Harry nodded. "We need to act quietly, house by house. Encourage the students to question what they hear. Show them what's really happening. And make sure Roll doesn't know we're countering him." Ron muttered, "Sounds like a full-time job." Harry smiled faintly. "It is, and that's why we work together." Over the next few days, the castle became a network of subtle observation. Harry and his group moved between houses carefully, talking to students in quiet moments, answering questions, and planting ideas that encouraged unity and critical thinking. Some students resisted at first, repeating Roll's arguments about tradition and strength. Others quietly considered Harry's words. Slowly, minds began to shift. One evening, Harry found himself in the library, surrounded by books, parchment, and notes he had made about Roll's influence. Luna appeared beside him, carrying a small stack of papers. "I collected some whispers from Ravenclaw," she said softly. "Some students are starting to question whether the old ways are really better." Harry glanced at her notes, impressed. "Good work, Luna. Every bit of doubt we create is a victory." She smiled calmly. "I think some of them already suspect that Roll isn't the only one influencing Hogwarts." Harry nodded, thinking of the students across the castle who were slowly waking up to the truth. Later that night, Harry met secretly with Draco near the dungeons. The Slytherin corridors were nearly empty, except for the faint echo of footsteps in the distance. "I've been listening," Draco said quietly. "Some Slytherins are arguing among themselves. A few are starting to question whether Roll is really right." Harry's eyes narrowed. "That's good. Keep watching. Don't interfere directly, just let the doubt grow." Draco smirked faintly. "It's amazing how easily they sway when they think someone else might be right." Harry sighed. "We're playing a dangerous game. One mistake, and Roll could regroup and take control again." Draco nodded. "I know, but it's kind of exciting, isn't it? Hogwarts turning into a battlefield of ideas." Harry allowed himself a faint smile. "It has to be done carefully. No one can see who's really getting things except us." Over the next week, the hidden network grew stronger. Students began questioning Roll quietly. They discussed what they had heard, weighed both sides, and some even started coming to Harry for advice without realizing they were part of his plan. Roll, meanwhile, continued to meet with his followers in secret. His influence had not diminished entirely, but Harry noticed that doubt was starting to spread among his students. Some were hesitant to speak, unsure if following Roll was truly the right path. One night, Harry walked along the castle corridors, thinking. He could feel the tension in the walls, like Hogwarts itself was aware of the battle being fought within it, and he realized something. The war wasn't about spells, duels, or curses. It was about loyalty. It was about influence. And it was about who would decide the future of Hogwarts. Harry clenched his fist, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on him once more. Roll had started a shadow war, but Harry Potter was ready to win it, quietly, invisibly, and without anyone even knowing he had done it. The battle for Hogwarts had entered its most dangerous phase yet, and the stakes were higher than ever. Over the next few days, Harry's plan began to show results. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, students who had been influenced by Roll started questioning his ideas. Whispers spread about whether Hogwarts truly needed the old ways Roll championed. Some students approached Harry in confidence, asking questions they didn't dare ask Roll. Others quietly resisted joining the secret meetings, choosing to spend more time studying or practicing magic. Roll noticed the shift. The meetings that had once felt confident and controlled began to show cracks. His supporters hesitated, some arguing quietly among themselves, unsure if they could fully trust him. Roll's calm, composed exterior remained, but Harry could sense the frustration growing beneath it, like a pot slowly coming to a boil. One night, Harry decided it was time to confront Roll directly, but not in front of students. He found him in an unused classroom in the dungeons, reviewing papers by the dim light of floating candles. "You've done well," Roll said softly when he noticed Harry. "I see your influence is spreading. A clever strategy, Potter." Harry didn't reply immediately. He studied Roll carefully. "It doesn't have to spread anymore," he said firmly. "Hogwarts belongs to the students, not to a shadow network trying to manipulate them." Roll smiled faintly, almost amused. "And yet here you are, influencing them just as I did." Harry shook his head. "I'm showing them the truth. You twisted their loyalty into fear and pride. I'm giving them a choice." For a long moment, Roll studied him, eyes sharp. Then he straightened and nodded slowly. "Very well, Potter. It seems your methods work. But remember, the game of influence is never truly over." Harry felt the weight of that statement, but didn't flinch. From that night onward, the secret debates, whispers, and tensions in the castle gradually faded. Roll stopped meeting with students in secret, realizing Harry had outmaneuvered him, not by force, but by trust. Students returned to their normal routines, though many quietly remembered the arguments they had heard. Some had been swayed by Roll, but most had learned to think for themselves. Over time, the castle settled into a quieter balance. Harry's network remained, but it no longer needed to act in secrecy. It became a silent web of students who trusted one another and could watch over the school, ensuring that dangerous ideas didn't spread unchecked again. Harry often walked the corridors at night, watching over the castle. He had learned that leadership wasn't about control, it was about guidance, subtle influence, and knowing when to step in. Hogwarts would never be completely free of challenges, but now it had someone protecting it from the shadows in a way that Roll never could. And so the Shadow War ended, not with a dramatic battle or a duel of wands, but with trust, strategy, and careful guidance. Hogwarts continued as a school of magic, filled with students who had the freedom to choose their paths and a quiet guardian watching over them from the shadows. Harry Potter had ruled Hogwarts from the shadows, and in doing so, he had ensured it would remain a place where courage, friendship, and choice mattered above all else. The castle's lights glimmered softly that night, and for the first time in weeks, Harry felt the weight of responsibility ease just a little. Hogwarts was safe, for now. And Harry smiled, knowing that sometimes the greatest battles were fought quietly, in the minds and hearts of those who lived within its walls. The end.